Hello, this is Ira Whiteside from Actuality Business Intelligence. And this presentation is going to walk you through the process of SSIS package generation programmatically through C# and also queue generation. Bit of a provocative title, SSIS automatic package and queue generation in 10 seconds. Obviously it meant to get your attention, at least in terms of speed and ease. Our company, Actuality Business Intelligence, works and is involved in BI consulting, some SQL Saturday marketing, software developments, specifically for SSIS and metadata capabilities. Teresa Whiteside's the president. I'm Ira Warren Whiteside. I'm the BI architect. We also have assistance from Jordan Martz, our strategist. Victoria Whiteside Stazowitz is our Vice President and Project Manager. Brandon Stazowitz is a business developer. And Christina Whiteside is in marketing. And more to come because we've got a granddaughter, Julia Stazowitz, who should be joining us in a couple of years. In essence, the Partridge family of BI. Contact information here, and this will be given again at the end, and you're going to be able to download the presentation at our website. Ira Whiteside at actualitybusinessintelligence.com, and of course Jordan Martz at actualitybusinessintelligence.com. Many of the items that we're going to discuss, what you see up here is a link from SQLServerCentral.com, a place where lots of folks put out technical articles with background and code samples for the Microsoft stack. Most of the material we're going to be covering today are covered by many articles that I have out there. We're not going to try to go through them, but suffice it to say that in terms of C# code generation, data profiling, and fuzzy matching, master data services, many of these items are covered out there in depth. If you were to do a Google search on SSAS package generation, you'd come up, as you can see, with about 326,000 results. The reason I start with this is mainly to begin to help folks understand that there is quite a bit of information that Microsoft does have and certainly supports a large community. The community itself is self-indulgent and self-helping, with many folks out there providing many examples. As we walk through the processes today of putting together a C# program to generate a package on Cube, we're going to draw on some of those community samples by way of helping you understand what is available. And we'll have a slide at the end with links to anybody and everybody who was sampled or was sourced in terms of some of the capabilities we're going to walk through. Specifically on those samples we talked about a second ago, those articles on SQL Server Central, there is a particular article extending SSIS Part 2 programmatically and dynamically building packages from way back in 2006, which is available. A little outdated now, but it will certainly help you go through the basics and understanding some of the details if you were to choose to use SSIS to generate your package with the native model. We're also going to discuss a far easier process for doing that, and we'll get to that in a bit. My personal experience is that really, as I got involved back early with Donald Farmer and Bill Baker and getting to contribute and be a part of the TAP process and rolling out SSIS 2005, the coolest thing really was the ability to generate packages programmatically. That in essence, the team behind the development, led by Kirk Castleton, had actually developed what in those days they called an ecosystem. In essence, not simply an ETL tool with a GUI and buttons and processes for you to create and implement your transformations, but an environment where you could actually take over and take control. If you look at mostly, there, at least in my experience, there's always a gap between pointed specific business requirements and the capability of any specific tool or application. Informatica, Data Stage, Raw SQL, and certainly SSIS. Obviously, there is a gap, and in many cases, that's exactly the problem, is early on identifying functionality gaps, and seeing what it needs and what you need to do to work through them. Once you've overcome that, as you can see here at the bottom, and you have a set of transformations, DTS, SQL, OWB, you name it, with those tools at your disposal, what you're faced with then is, well, how can I reuse them with slightly different file formats? And of course, there is where there's a whole discussion about SSIS patterns, capabilities, and extensibility. And we can certainly delve into that. I'd also recommend that recently Andy Leonard has written a book on SSIS patterns, which would be interesting, and we'll discuss that a little bit more in depth later. We're going to focus, though, on actual code generation. SSIS does not have the transformation limitations from a practical perspective, no gaps when you're not relying on the BIDS interface. And what I mean by that statement is certainly there had to be some compromises, and due to timelines and budget constraints, levels that they were able to take the GUI front end for SSIS, if you will, which is BIDS, Business Intelligence Development Studio, soon to be renamed, or actually renamed already, in that you're limited to the pre-built task and components, and we'll get into the model and what tasks and components are in a minute too. The point is that because they've provided this openness to their programming model, their system management object, that this becomes incredibly important, that there is no limit, at least in terms of what you can do, given that you're able to take on and understand some of the concepts that are required to actually generate the packages. From a purely data transformation perspective, the core functionality consists of creating connection managers, control flow tasks, data transformation tasks, using the stock components, perhaps script components, even building custom components, all based on an exposed object model. A custom component is interesting and a slightly different topic. That's where we could actually build a widget or a component that we could drop into SSIS. Our focus today is really going to be on generating the packages that utilize the components, not actually writing the components. So the SMO provides the ability to programmatically generate all of this between dynamic external metadata. And that really is the important distinction and one of the, in essence, limitations of SSIS. So for the purposes of clarity, let's talk about the differences between internal metadata and external metadata, at least in the context of SSIS. From a packages perspective, there's only one type, internal or design time. The package assumes the metadata, mainly columns, column mappings, connections, queries, and paths, are the same at runtime as they were when they were created at design time. There are various configuration options and an expression language that would let you affect some of the parameters that are used for these connections. However, you cannot change column mappings or derived column values. And this, of course, means that in essence, your packages are relatively limited in their ability to adapt to what are normally expected changes. Addition of columns, change in column types, new columns being added, or certainly change in rules. Beyond configuration, it's common for a developer who wants to design a package for a specific component, be able to use it for a slightly different set of inputs, obviously wanting to reuse it. At this point, the primary reuse technique is copy and paste, and then change a bunch of crap. If we were to look at it, what we'd really like is your key to leveraging SSIS. In this case, the graphic I've chosen is a newly designed architectural wonder, I think. It's a house that's fully glass so that you can see completely through the house. Obviously, the analogy here is that the key to leveraging SSIS and enabling external metadata files is the openness of the SNO object model. So once you've designed and implemented an ETL process of required transformations, many times you'd really like to be able to continue to use that. Or certainly if we take the straightforward example of sourcing a file and having a client add a column to that file, it would be nice to simply put that new column name in and that data type, and then have that be able to filter through your transformation process. Along the way, you may need to apply a rule, but the bottom line is, even if it's a simple import, you would like to not have to open that package up, modify it, go through data validations, frankly, even for a basic change, sometimes taking several hours. It's not always just the fact that you're adding one column, it's the fact that it rifles through the entire package and requires all of the components and objects to revalidate their metadata. So again, ease, abuse, reusability are key here. The SSIS engine in itself is very powerful and capable, but we're looking for ways to reduce the maintenance cost and time involved in putting those packages up. I've got a display here from the MSDN site of the system management object. And briefly, I just want to point out two areas. I don't want to try to walk through the entire model. It's not really that in-depth of a technical session. But as you can see at the core, you have in here in the yellow a package with tasks, containers, and then within those tasks specifically data flow tasks, whereas the bulk of the work and the bulk of what we're going to be discussing today. So within those data flow tasks, we then have source, transformations, and destinations. And obviously overriding that, connection managers. There are other capabilities and portions of the model, but we'll focus in on these guys for now. So here in using my third grade drawing, we can see that we've got a package, a task, can have multiple tasks, can have data flow tasks, and connection managers, which really gives us the outline, if you will, of the processes we're going to need to walk through to generate the packages. Once we get inside of one of those data flow tasks, then we get to the meat and the heart of SSIS, which is utilization of the pipeline, the in-memory capability. So here we've also got components within the task, source adapters, transformations. These transformations can be any of the stock transformations, sorting, derived columns. They can even be custom components. And certainly here then you've got destination adapters, which can also be customized. So we've been talking about code generation. If we're to look at the process, there's a good article by Enrique Catella on SolidDQ where they've gone through and he's detailed out a process for creating a SSAS package that will read an incoming table and copy it. Basically a two-step process. I have a similar article on SQLServerCentral.com. However, even for this basic process, in this case Enrique is using the stock system management object and C#. It's 24 pages long in order for you to be able to accomplish, in essence, the creation of two components within a data flow within one control flow. So in this case, we're taking and obviously copying 290 rows of data across and creating a section of the employee table. What I'd like to drill in on is there is a much easier way to do that, which has been available for the last several years, and it's actually called EzAPI. It's really a framework that includes a number of classes that make the development of the packages significantly easier. I've got a demo of that, but what I'd like to do is we're going to actually save. I've kind of struggled with whether to go through the demo in the beginning, the middle, or the end, and I've settled in on saving it for the end. So we'll look at some real code and create some packages, actually in some queues too, before we're done. If we were to look at the use of EzAPI, and we'll get into the model and how it works, but let's just take a look real quick. This is 24 lines of code. This 24 lines of code, actually, and we're not going to walk through all of the code right now. We'll do that in detail as we walk through the demo later on. We'll create this same package. It will create an OLADB source. In this case, our second step is writing to a flat file. Nevertheless, with 24 lines of code, we've really been able to consume a table without defining any external metadata, have it written out to create an external file, and in essence all we've done is entered in the necessary information for our connections. Obviously a significantly less amount of work. Notwithstanding, you have to be able to understand some C#. It could be Visual Basic. These examples are going to be on C#, but you have to understand some C# and have some setup work, and include, in this case, if we're discussing it from a project management, development, or commercial application perspective, the developers and a set of capabilities and methodology set up to support it. However, I would contend that that's going to be significantly less than the problem of continuing to manually maintain packages and continuing to struggle with the issues of sourcing and getting in skilled developers. So the EzAPI generated package, in essence, did come from Microsoft. It's supported, and I have links here for the package and all of its capabilities to install it. I'll be showing you some links later on where there's some gentlemen who've done some great work, Bill Fellows, on going through and working through the kinks in that process, as well as Matt Mason. And in essence, we owe this to necessity being the mother of invention. Evgeny Koblov, one of the testers of the SSAS team, has put together really this very powerful framework. You know, the team had used it at Microsoft for several years and have now, actually since 2010, published it, and it is available for 2012 capabilities. If we were to overview the code generation and the model, it's a much simpler model than the raw system management model. As we look at this, we're looking at two basic class hierarchy diagrams here. Here's our hierarchy for the executable, which obviously can have a container and a task. Within the task and within the container, you can have a package or a for loop, and within the task, you can have a data flow. Additionally, as we break into that data flow, we've got components, adapters, transforms, source, destinations, and say the sort transform. Again, a significantly easier model. One of the things they've done to organize this, and there are 2.5 pages to go through here. We're going to go through the first set here, and then I'm just going to pass through the other ones. But for you to have an understanding of, there are many templates that have been provided with EzAPI. So for instance, the first template is a package with a single data flow task without any connection managers. The next one is a package with a single for loop container with data flow task in it without any connection managers. The third one is a package with a single data flow that contains a source connection data flow with connection managers. That happens to be the one that we use. There are many. We do not need to go through them all for you to get the point that the EzAPI model is extensible. It's available on CodePlex, and these folks have already put quite a bit of time into defining commonly used templates. And again, we're not going to walk through all of these. There are several more. So that actually ends the discussion of packages. So we're going to take a second here, and we'll actually go do a demo, and then we're going to move on to the generation of cubes. So let's open up, if we open up our BIDS Explorer here, you can see that we've got a package here. We've got an OADB source. Let's open that up. We're pulling the person address table here, little AdventureWorks example. But we're taking that table and we're going to use the data flow here to simply write it out to a flat file, and with mapping columns, and in this case the columns are the same names as the incoming columns. And you can see this particular example is called Simple EzAPI Package, Sample, Data Flow, Demo, Pass, Virtual Chapter 2. Obviously I'm not prone to short names. So if we look at the code, as we looked earlier, here's the actual code. We've got our references, and sorry, let me slow down here a little bit. we're using a template to EzAPI to file package. So the template's assuming we're going to read something from ABI as the adapter and write it out to a flat file. We've got a little bit of code here to set up our connection strings. And then in essence, here's the code that we actually would provide for the connection. The local host, our database, local host, our server, AdventureWorks, our database, person address, our table, and we're going to write it out to results.txt. In this case, we'll create package 4. So if we save that and run this process, I'd start counting. Hopefully it does work within 10 seconds.